Hello and welcome to Dragonboat Dynasty, a podcast where I share my experience in building, coaching and scaling a Dragonboat team. My name is Sean and I'm the head coach of Argonaga Dragonboat team with over 100 active members based in Malaysia. In late 2022, we raced in Kuching for the very first time, Kuching, Sarawak. This race was very daunting for a couple of reasons. Well, about 10 reasons. The first was that it was our first competitive race where we used our assessment sheet for the very first time. So the assessment sheet is a 100-point scoring system that includes physical, technical, endurance, strength, and also contribution to the team. And where paddlers would actually collect all these points in order to field their way into boat A and boat B, depending on whether or not they want to contribute or they want to be competitive that season. And this was the first time we were using it, so we didn't know if it would work. We didn't know what kind of lineup we would come up with. But because of transparency, we were forced to kind of, in most of the ways, adhere to the scores that were collected by all the paddlers. Of course, we did have about 10% leeway for the coaches to make any, decisions to improve the balance and the overall chemistry of the boats, but 10% isn't a lot of points. And the last time we chased after medals was actually before the pandemic, which was 2 years prior, 2.5 years prior. So at that point, we didn't know if we recovered in terms of strength and endurance and ability as quickly as the opponents, because we had no yardstick against anybody. And we kind of spent most of the time having a lot of fun while we were paddling instead of actually paddling very well, to a point where a couple of paddlers actually left our team because they thought that we were not competitive enough. There was still a little bit of this pessimistic side of us, which was nervous that we would always come in last in every heat. I know that we have come a long way, but we were still afraid that we would, kind of disappoint ourselves. It was also our first race in the new venue, and we did not understand the water conditions. It was also a river as well, so we were usually very wary of rivers. And also, most of the competitors we were up against, we have never met them before. We have no idea who they were. So, it's a clean slate. We had no idea what was going on. Of course, there was one thing we were sure about, was that the organizer was not known for being organized. We have raced in prior occasions in competitions that were organized by this particular organizer. They were not known for being well organized. And sure enough, this race wasn't actually very well organized either. But that was beside the point. And most importantly, it was actually the first full season since Adam is the current coach as of time of this podcast. Adam and I took over to helm the team. Filling the shoes of our past captain was a tough one. He did a lot of great work in the team, and we didn't think at that point, we didn't know if we would be able to live up to the team's expectation of what we can bring to the team. And also because half the team was distracted by post-pandemic revenge travel. It's not their fault, right? It's nobody's fault. Everybody at that point, because they can travel, they just, fly wherever they can. But what happened was it did cause us to doubt our performance level because half of our members were not active enough. So all these little things made for a very delicate season to manage. There were a lot of adaptations implemented to a maturing team at that point. If you've listened to prior episodes, you know that in the past few years, we have been systematizing a lot of part of the team. So this is part of it. There were new levels of accountabilities that were given to the paddlers for the very first time. Looking back, I didn't know why I was so panicked about it. These paddlers were clearly very competent people. And in areas they were not, I could just, as easily step in and give them a consult. But at that point, it was a very great step, right? We gave them a lot of accountability. They did appreciate the confidence that we have on them. And in turn, they help us shoulder the burden of our goals as well. The full burden of the season's goals were not just on the shoulders of coaches. In the past, it was all up to the coaches to ensure that the goals of the season was met. If the paddlers did not want to train on strength and endurance, it was up to us coaches to constantly resort to making tweaks to techniques in order to keep improving that millisecond after millisecond. So there was a lot of pressure put on coaches in the years prior. For the first time, I let each boat control their strategies. This spans from where they sit, whether it's the configuration they sit, where do they place the engines and rockets and pacers, how many of them do they want, and all this kind of stuff, to how aggressively they want their race start, race middle, and race end to be. So our race strategy is built in such a way that we break it down into 3 sections: race start, race middle, and race end. And how we determine our aggressiveness of it depends on ourselves, it depends on the water condition, and it also depends on our competitors as well. So we usually take the first few heats to properly study all our competitors, to know where they are, how strong they are in different stages of the race set, so then we can tweak our strategies accordingly. But this season onwards, in Kuching, I handed the reins all to the individual boats. Part of me trusted that they were able to do all this stuff on their own, because I mean, they have been paddling as long as I have been in the team, some of them. Another part of me is, well, in a way, secretly afraid to take full responsibility for failing the entire team if I made the wrong decision. I never had to do this before. I've always been making decisions with the past captain. And during this time, the current captain, Adam, has been so busy working on all the operations and things, and he didn't have as much knowledge and experience in coaching as the past captain did. So at the end of the day, I did feel quite alone in making these decisions. And because it was the first time, I was, to be honest, I was very afraid of making wrong decisions and failing the entire team. One wrong step can cause everything to fall apart. So the merit system, the assessment score sheet, was a double-edged sword. On one end, we had a very strong and competent boat, because those who were the strongest, those who had the best scores, will go into one boat, boat A, right? But that also meant the weakest paddlers were left to fend for themselves. And in the past, as much as we say that we are merit-based for races where we want to win, we tend to have some form of balance, because we feel that if the weaker boat, boat B, was only filled with the weakest paddlers, then morale itself could kill them. And what is the point of going down if you don't have the morale, if you already know that you're not going to get anywhere, right? So we kind of balance things a little bit so that there is some, I guess, sliver of chance even for boat B. And in doing so, we are taking all the opportunities that we could have had in boat A away from boat A. So, yeah, tough calls, right? So in the end, I keep reminding everyone, and myself especially, that this is first and foremost a sports team. And as a sports team, we are merit-based. And that's just the truth of it. We can't live our life trying to protect the weakest people all the time. They have to learn how to protect themselves. There was, however, one lineup that did not turn out according to plan, which was the 20 crew open category. So in that 20 crew, half of them were pulling the weight of the other half, who were barely present the entire season. So the latter group was there mainly to fill in the seats in order for the boat to qualify to go down, because we need minimum 18 paddlers in order to bring that category down. In hindsight, I wish I could have made a tough decision to scrap the entire category so we don't have that open 20 crew, in order to protect the morale of our strongest paddlers. I also feel that in hindsight, in many cases, we neglect to protect the stronger paddlers in order to protect the weaker paddlers. I think that is something that we have to look at, and we have to be a bit more conscious of moving forward. Do we want to just be a regular weekend warrior team, or do we want to increase our chances of winning? Because our goals will determine all the decisions we make. Giving paddlers accountability also had its downsides. There were mistakes that could have been avoided had I intervened, but that would have prevented them from learning valuable lessons. See, giving them accountability is sitting by the side and looking at them making fundamental decisions that you know can be fixed, or can be changed, or can be remedied very easily with some experience. But if I was always there to protect them from falling and scraping their knee, then how are they supposed to learn? They won't know how painful it is. and prevent themselves from falling the next time if they never felt the pain of it the first time. The girls' boat during the semi-finals made a decision to let a weaker paddler race. The weaker paddler was allowed to start in the lineup as a paddler. In the prior heats, she was actually a drummer. So in order to do that, they had to swap up one of our strongest female paddlers to the drummer seat. Well, she was also a very competent, one of the strongest drummer as well. But at that point in time, we needed her as a paddler more than as a drummer. But the girls' boat made a collective decision to allow the weaker paddler paddle. She was weaker because she was more junior. It wasn't anything else. It was just a fundamental, if you're more junior, then you tend to have less grasp of the technique and strength and everything. So in that semi-finals, they lost out from a finals position by 0.28 seconds, 0.28 seconds, a fraction of a second. Had I overruled their decision to prioritize giving everyone a chance to paddle, instead of optimizing the boat for winning, we may have got a chance into finals. I mean, 0.28 seconds is a few longer pulls with better technique would have overcome that 0.28 seconds. During that time, I was torn between giving them accountability and all the consequences that come with it, knowing full well that had I intervened, we would have stood a significantly higher chance of being in finals, and that would have boosted our morale even further in that season. I know I had to give them accountability because they had to learn. A part of me wanted to interfere for the sake of my own ambition because I want to win. I am a very ambitious person. I want to win. I don't want to go to races and just be half-assed. As coaches, we need to make unpopular decisions that hurt feelings of individuals for the sake of the team. Most people do not understand why we make decisions that we make because they see from the perspective of themselves. And if they find that they're losing out on something, they feel as if it's an unfair decision. Had I overruled the decision and the boat failed to enter finals, I would have lost a chance at finals and also the trust of the paddlers. And at that point of time, I thought that the trust of the paddlers meant more than finals, because even if we would have gone to finals, the chances of actually getting a medal was slim. But if I would have lost the trust of the paddlers, I don't know how I would have been able to regain it from them. So these are the questions I will never have an answer to. Making a decision is always a flip of a coin based on a hunch. And not everyone will understand it. It's about how much risk we are willing to take and what are the consequences of all these risks. At that moment, I wondered if the girls subconsciously sabotage themselves. I mean, we have done it before. The guys both have done it before. The mixed both have done it before. In many categories, various categories, we would have done it before. But in this specific time, I wondered if the girls both would have subconsciously sabotaged themselves. They knew the chances of getting into finals were slim, and they needed an excuse that allowed themselves to sleep better at night, knowing that they did not go into finals because they opted to give everyone a chance to paddle, so they could always blame that loss in finals to deciding to be inclusive. This was a good enough reason to lose, because investing in the future of a paddler was equally important. But we have growth races and we have winning races. During growth races, we focus on supporting the development of younger paddlers, younger not in terms of age, but younger in terms of age in the team. And during winning races, we would need to be clinical and ruthless in our decision for that sole purpose, winning. But that day, I failed to outrank that decision with my position. If only I had done it, there would have been one Argo Naga boat in the finals on our maiden appearance in Kuching. It didn't matter if we lost out by a mile or by an inch. Finals is finals. And that meant a lot because at that race, there were only 4 boats that could qualify to finals, as opposed to other races where there are 6 boats that could enter the finals. So that's a significant number. Just a month later, we found ourselves racing in Penang, the site we always went back to since our first ever race as a team. Our men's boat A was physically competent, but not so mentally. And I didn't realize it until later on, but I was frustrated with a lot of things that they did. They didn't want to do test water the day before, giving excuses that they've paddled here before many times, they know what to expect. And during the day, they also gave me the impression that they were quick to concede. They were like, we've gone far enough, let's just chill out and, don't push ourselves. So I was visibly annoyed by the attitude at that point. And despite my short chat with the team, they didn't actually seem to change their stance as well. They couldn't be bothered. So some were even reluctant to paddle for semi-finals because, they were tired, they wanted to call it a day. I mean, I understand they're fatigued, but during race, we always have to do our best, right? Regardless of how we feel, we must do our best to push all the way as far as we can. And they managed to get into minor finals, which was a consolation heat altogether. I mean, minor finals means the people who can't get into finals get a consolation finals, that 6th position to 9th position kind of people. At that point, some paddlers were already giving up and saying that, winning a trophy for this kind of standing meant nothing to them. Because it was minor finals, right? It was just consolation. It was like a pity finals. I was glad that at the last moment, they decided to fight tooth and nail to regain the 9th overall placing that they lost in the semi-final standings. This lifted the spirits of not only one boat, but actually the entire team. We needed this consolation win, and they brought it home for us because it was the first ever proper win since returning from COVID. And we needed this to kind of ride motivation or a small high or whatever it is, right, to the next season. I still didn't understand why the spirits were so low. And until that night when my assistant coach spoke to one of the team, and his response was, Sean said we didn't have to push this hard for this race, that we didn't have a chance. So my first reaction was, what? Did I say that? But after giving a few thoughts, it hit me, right? In my process of being transparent with the paddlers, because I told them the season before that we would go for transparency, that was why the assessment sheet came out, because it was the first step at complete transparency. And in my process of being more transparent with the paddlers, I let all my doubts be laid bare for them to see. And all they did was follow my orders. Yes, I had my doubts on the Penang race because some of the people who went for Kuching did not go for Penang. And Penang race confirmation came very late. We didn't train for it. So we just had to wing the whole thing, right? Not whole thing, but most of it. So I had my doubts. But I made a mistake of communicating my doubts to the team, especially the people in A-Boat, and they took it too literally. So the greatest lesson for 2022 is that I needed to change how I see failures. I need to be honest with them instead of lining up with excuses, because it wasn't just this year when the girls' boat was using an excuse to not get them into finals. Many times before, we found ourselves giving ourselves excuses and sabotaging our lineups in order to make ourselves feel better at night, because we had so little chance of entering finals that we reduce it and we gave ourselves an excuse to say we're building the team, or we're building the morale of the team, or we are, all the other stuff that we tell ourselves, pat ourselves in the back and say that this is why we are doing it, that's why we didn't win. If we want to win, if we want to properly win something, we need to start by being honest with ourselves. I need to encourage fighting through the slimmest of chances, no matter what chance is there. Even if it's less than 1% chance of getting in, we need to fight all the way with everything we have until the very end. Only if I start doing this, the the team will also start changing their perspectives. So it's all down to how I see things and how I communicate what I see. The girls in coaching did the same. And it wasn't entirely their fault. They've been programmed with excuses. We are only weekend warriors. We're not as strong as them. We want to be inclusive. We want to try out new strategies. These are all excuses if we were to be honest with ourselves. Because we cannot accept that we're not strong enough. If we cannot accept that we did not train hard enough. We do not accept that we're not as good as them. There is time to be inclusive. That is in growth races. And there is time to try out new strategies. And that is during training and test water. And to be honest, we stopped being weekend warriors when we started hitting the gym 3 to 4 times a week. Even though we don't train in the lake 3 to 4 times a week, we are still training somewhere 3 to 4 times a week. So as long as we keep living in our delusional little worlds, we cannot break away from this midfield pack, and we cannot start chasing after the leaders. And if we want to be one of the giants, sustainably, consistently, we have to start by changing the way we think. We cannot give ourselves any more excuses for failing. Failing is failing. Failing is all our shortcoming. And that's just a fact. So that is my greatest lesson for 2022. Anyway, I'll be away for a hiking trip in the Himalayas for 2 weeks. And there will be no new episodes until I return at the end of February. Until then, Happy Chinese New Year to all who are celebrating, and happy holidays to everyone else. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.